Excited to have you all here. And for those of you joining through our YouTube live stream, great to have you joining us. We are going to continue doing more and more webinars and making them available to everyone. So I'm excited for us to get started today. Reminder to use the chat if you are in our Zoom room to use the Q&A for questions. But I'm going to go ahead and stop talking so we can get into the really good stuff. Today we have Alicia Carney, and she is one of our season one participants. She is a marketing specialist or head of marketing, and growth. I can't even remember your titles anymore. But you know what you're talking about, essentially, is what I'm trying to convey. But thank you so much for being here, Alicia. I know that everyone is now thinking, okay, I built something, what do I do? And that is exactly what you're going to be able to talk about. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Amazing. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Let me just make sure I'm sharing my screen correctly. Cool. You can see my slides, MVP to revenue. Lovely. Okay, cool. So hi, everyone. My name is Alicia, and thank you, Whitney, for the intro. So I'm here today to talk about some of the lessons that I've learned helping early stage teams turn ideas into revenue. And so this little quick talk is designed to give you some practical ways to validate what you're building and to stress test if your idea is truly a problem that people are willing to pay to have it solved for them. So like Whitney mentioned, I have about 14 years of experience in kind of more like war stories and battle scars of growing and scaling startups ranging from multiple stints of 0 to 1. So I've been like a founding product marketer several times, getting through to Series A or B. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I did 3.5 years growing new products at Deliveroo, which is one of the leading food delivery platforms across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific. Um, and I've rebuilt the whole product marketing team from scratch and managed lots and lots of products. So I have a bit of trauma that I'm going to give all of the lessons to you on what I've learned along the way, and I've seen a lot. Um, so yeah, as Whitney mentioned, I'm currently the head of marketing at Ravio, which is a comp data platform to help companies spot and fix pay gaps. And most importantly, I was a season one member of the B2B cohort of She Builds, which was truly a life-changing experience. I know I don't have to explain that to you. You can understand what it feels like to build something, will it into existence. And so I'm really excited to pass forward some ideas for how to take it to the next level if you are looking to turn it into a startup. Because one thing I love about Lovable is that there's no right or wrong way to build something, whether it's a passion project or something that's more commercially minded. There's just so many different ways to facilitate that creative process. But there are some go-to-market fundamentals that I want to share with you today. So don't be scared by these numbers, but let's just jump into some stats. The reality is that 90% of startups will probably fail. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the biggest reasons is that they're building something that has no real market need. And again, don't be scared by this. Also, this is something I found super interesting in my product marketing world. When surveyed, 72% of founders believe that they deeply understand their customers and the pain points that they're solving, but only 10% of those surveyed founders actually had validated buyer personas where they had done the real research to understand their customers' needs. Even more interesting here is that 80% of early stage startups never test willingness to pay, even before fundraising. And I have worked for some of those early stage startups. I've worked for a company that closed at like a $2.5 million seed round without a single paying customer. And the reason I genuinely don't think you need to worry about these stats is because it does not have to be this way. You don't have to guess, you can test. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because really what it is, the vulnerability of launching a new startup is around what level of risk you accept in making that transition from idea to commercialized product. And there's very clear and not labor or time intensive ways to reduce that risk. So that's what we're going to talk about today to reduce the go-to-market gap. Quick survey, if we can. I did see in the kickoff call um, that some folks had actually spoken to customers already in the few days before. Can we get a little quick sense check in the chat? How many folks actually talked to one customer or potential user? Five. Any ideas? Trying to make the Zoom thing show up here. Do you guys see any responses? Talked to five users. Awesome. And I did see one user, five. Fantastic. That is so good. Oh my gosh, look at this. Everyone, you're already not a step ahead of 90% of startups out there. Um, I also saw a really great post on LinkedIn. I think it was from Portia, who took a very interesting AI-led approach to validating and building qualitative research about your users. So you guys are really understanding the importance of talking to real people before you dive into building, which is great. Ooh, a little poll. Love that. Thank you. So building a startup doesn't always have to start with the best idea. But the reality is that we all start with an idea. We fall in love with our idea. Maybe we thought of it in the shower. Maybe it's something that we want to use based on the problems that we've had in our careers or our lives. But uh, it makes so much sense in our head, but we have to make sure that we're taking that extra step to validate if there's actual willingness to pay. So, in order to build a de-risk startup, you need a few things. A validated problem, which I saw someone just mention in the chat, a validated problem for an underserved market with proof that people will pay to solve it. It's truly that simple. So if you realize that your startup idea also has an incumbent competitor, you don't need to panic. That happened to me. I had an idea. I was so excited about it. I researched it, found someone had beat me to it, and I felt a little bit slightly devastated. But that's a good sign because that is actually a signal that there is willingness to pay to solve that problem. And there is an underserved market that is keeping that company alive. And your job is to come in and solve it better, or even take a smaller subset of the job to be done and solve that piece in particular, at least as a starting point. So at the end of the day, you are not yet launching a product, you're testing a bet. And I think that positioning is really important. So you may have built something, excuse me, over the past few days without doing a lot of external validation, although it does seem like you've done some, which is great. But the hackathon is a starting point. It's not the final destination. And I want to give a shout out to all of you who did speak to those users. I think that was really, really fantastic. But for everyone else, including myself, when I was in season one, I didn't have time to do really in-depth research. And so after the hackathon ends, this is the moment where you can go out there and start validating before you're investing more time, energy, and money. Because as Seth Godin says, I really love and remember this quote for decades, like, you want to build products for your customers, not go out and find customers for your product. So start with the problem first. Obsess over a painful, persistent problem, like truly obsess over the problem before you think about solutions. And you want that problem to cause real consequence for a specific group of people. The more narrow you can niche down that group of people, the better, the quicker you will find commercial traction. And you want to make sure that that group of people are already spending time and money trying to solve it. Again, I've worked for startups in the past where the technology is so innovative or forward-looking that you first have to educate the market and build the market before you even think about selling. And it's absolutely possible to do, but quite frankly, like it's a really difficult position to be in, and it delays the time for you to actually get signal of willingness to pay. So don't confuse people who like your idea, even though it feels really good, with the group of people who need this enough to pay. I have had some founders say in the past, like, I had this amazing product. Here's all the different ingredients that makes it unique. People will love this because it is unique, but you should never take that for granted. And sometimes if people are not able to articulate and fully understand the value and what it means to them, you're not going to get the signups that you're looking for. And that's where positioning comes into play. And I've got a couple stories that I can share at the end of the presentation on how I've approached this in the past. And Similarly, I've made these mistakes. Like when I was a product marketer at a customer service software company called Kayako, when we first launched, we built an entire freemium, like free trial onboarding experience. And we were like, this is great. It's so unique. Like they're going to love this. And unfortunately, like the audience didn't 100% care about a lot of what we invest in our time and money in. So having those feedback loops and that validation can help you to make sure that you're not making assumptions of what people want and what they'll pay for, but that you're actually testing and validating as you go. And ultimately, this is all to make sure that you're just not making things harder for yourself. A lot of this is around reducing risk and just taking a path that's less painful because it's not necessary. You don't have to kind of grind as hard as you might think you need to test willingness to pay. So one of the biggest mindset shifts that I want you to walk away from today is that willingness to pay, sorry about all the acronyms, is part of product market fit. It's not something that you are going to test after you've built when you have full-on startup mode. And it's also not exactly a pricing exercise that you're tacking on at the end. It is just payment. It it's how people tell you that something matters, and you don't need hundreds of customers to validate product market fit. You just need a handful of customers who care enough to pay. And another kind of minor point here, well, not really minor, but like side note, is that product market fit is not static. It's more, I think Elena has called it more of a treadmill. And that's actually what I built my She Builds project about, is that evaluating product market fit as an ongoing feedback loop is a moving target that continues to shift based on timing in the market, the position you take in the market, and your ability to evolve with your customer. So establishing the behaviors and your reliance on building with the voice of the customer in mind is really, really critical that you establish that now before you go into full startup mode. But at the end of the day, willingness to pay is one of the strongest anchors that you have to navigate product market fit. So that's why this is so important here today. Okay, so how do we actually evaluate willingness to pay? And this is again where a lot of founders get stuck, where they either skip it entirely through to getting a lot of money in the bank, or they make it just way too complicated. So a simple three-question framework that you can use to validate willingness to pay is asking three questions. On problem clarity, do they feel urgency around this today? If your user says, yeah, this is a problem, but they can live without solving it right now, it's not urgent enough. You're probably starting with your idea versus their actual visceral pain. The second question here is evidence of value. What would solving it be worth to them? This is where you figure out what's at stake if this is or is not solved, how much money, time, energy they would save or gain if this problem is solved. And here you're not just testing pricing, you're checking if there's real value on the other side of the problem being solved. And the third is the commitment test, which is will they pay? And usually you want to be optimizing for an actual transaction of money, but it can also be with time or access to solving that problem. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding the traps of building from your idea versus their pain, waiting too long to test willingness to pay, and trying to appeal to too broad of an audience, and trying to appeal to everyone instead of finding your first five paying users. And when you break it down into like an initial objective of just finding five paying users, it feels so much more manageable than like, how am I going to monetize my product immediately? That's like a long-term goal you don't have to worry about yet. But I think even though these questions are incredibly simple, they are effective. And I have seen from my career, from early stage startups to scale ups, that the absence of these questions being asked and considered can be make or break for that initial scary 90% stat. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so apologies for my voice today. So how do you do this? Again, it doesn't need to be super expensive or time or energy intensive, and you don't have to wait until your product is 100% finished to test willingness to pay. In fact, I think you should not wait until your product is fully finished. This is something that you can validate before you've written a single line of code or launched anything formally. So what you need to do is build something lightweight with maybe a tool like Lovable. Start with a simple landing page and make sure that it clearly communicates your value prop, what you're solving for, who it's exactly for. And if you need any support on this from a positioning and messaging perspective, just DM me in Discord. I'm more than happy to help. And then you need to add in a price. Even if it's a placeholder price, you need to know your audience, how they react to that real number. And sometimes I find it quite awkward when I've done pricing sprints for established companies. The way that you approach it is you sit down with someone, you talk through what they're going to get, how it's packaged, and you say, how much would you pay for this? And it just feels so strange to have people pick numbers out of their head. But when you have enough data in that data set of people's responses off the top of their head, you actually start to see themes and trends and parameters of the most common responses. You can remove outliers, and there's lots of fancy, sophisticated pricing elasticity stuff that you can do that starts with that same basic premise of asking, how much would you pay? And then you add your call to action, whether that's to join a wait list, book a call, or even prepay. I know we've talked about propping up a landing page with a wait list in other webinars in the past as well. You can just have a shop front. You don't have to have the fully baked product yet to test willingness to pay. And this could look like an MVP where you charge $30 a month for a Notion page, a shared Slack channel, and that's it. But it solves a very specific pain, so people will pay. Or you could just show a lovable prototype exactly like what you've built so far, DM it to a couple potential ICP buyers on LinkedIn and say, would you pay for this? And add a Stripe link. Like that's really what you need to do. A lot of times it just takes getting over the awkwardness of asking people these questions. That's something that I've struggled with in the past, but that is not a reason to not do it. So you are not just testing the clicks here, you're testing commitment and the urgency behind their decision. And you can measure this through definitely clicks, but signups and also drop off. So you will see when you put these questions forward, a certain amount of people will drop off. Do not be discouraged. The goal is not to have a perfect conversion rate. It's to generate the signal of willingness to pay in a larger group when 5 or 10 users. And so as soon as people start saying yes, that is the start of your momentum. Cool. Okay, so these are kind of the 5 steps that you can use to go from MVP to something people pay for. And I have seen this work. This is kind of my job as a product marketer, or in my past life as a product marketer, is to run through these 5 things. So step one is nail the problem framing, not your specific idea. And I did see folks talking about this in the kickoff call of spending all this time in building a really discrete PRD and the problems that we solve. And in my cohort of She Builds, I actually found this to be the hardest part, and it helped me empathize with the founders that I work with in the past, how incredibly difficult it is to be as discrete and uncomfortably narrow as possible in the specific problem that you're solving. But that is so important. And I think the risk that we accept in starting new startups often comes with starting with an idea that is too big, too broad, too something for everyone, and that ultimately negatively affects your ability to speak to someone in their specific pain and accelerate at least your learning, if not your commercial traction itself. So step two is around identifying that early ICP, and that very clearly that comes after the problem. You don't want to start with an audience, you start with the problem. But to identify your early ICP, this is not going to be your dream customer. You don't want to say, I'm going to build this and, Lovable is going to be my first customer. You want to talk about the first most discrete person who has the most urgent pain. And that is your wedge in, and you'll work up more aspirationally as you scale product market fit in your feedback loops, which we just talked about. Next is talk to your customers and never stop talking to your customers. This is where you validate, do they really feel the pain? Is this my assumption? Do they actually have budget allocated and ready to solve this pain, either with me or with an alternative? What are they doing today instead? And very often when I will work with a startup, I find their assumptions of what the alternatives are not always fully representative of the full set of alternatives that they're competing with. It's not always a direct competitor. It's often staying working in spreadsheets or doing nothing or some other random, like writing on paper. Like there's so many other alternatives more holistically from the human experience than what you might originally understand. And so tapping into that is really important at this stage. The fourth step is to share your solution vision. So then you can start to say, okay, here's my She Builds project. Here's a Figma mockup or even a paragraph. And you want to test how people react. Do they understand it? Do they have follow-up questions? Do they want it? Are they willing to pay? And that's step five, introducing pricing early and measuring their real behavior. So when you introduce a price point, you want to literally observe what happens. Do people hesitate? Do they kind of flinch? Are they like, wow, that's not very much? Um, who signs up? Who drops off? What behavior gives you real signal on product market price fit? And this process in itself will help you skip months, maybe even years of guesswork and actually see where customers are leaning in so that you don't have to accept the risk that we discussed on slide one. This is all completely avoidable by getting these behaviors in now. So I just have a couple quick examples from my career, and then we will wrap up and we can do some Q&A. So my first example here is Lune. So Lune was a climate or is a climate tech API that lets companies embed carbon offsetting and climate action into their products. I was the fifth employee and I think the first commercial hire. The technology was really solid, but the challenge was initial traction. So at pre-seed stage, Lune's product could technically work for any business, which sounds great. It sounds like the TAM, the total addressable market is everyone. But in reality, it made it really difficult for us to sell to any one buyer. There was not a lot of clear urgency. There was no clear budget owner, no obvious must-have moment. So it just forced us into the nice to have category. So we had to get specific. So I worked with the founders to narrow the ICP to a hypothesis of fast-growing UK payments companies like fintechs that were scaling fast. And what I learned by talking to them is that they deeply cared about differentiation, but they had nothing really to stand on that claim. And so to do this, I literally, again, I had no resource. So I knocked on doors on LinkedIn and went to people that I thought might be the right person to bring into the buying committee. And I interviewed them to understand their pain, their reality, their decision-making dynamics. And what I learned is that climate impact for them was completely a nice to have running parallel to their roadmaps. So I learned that unless my proposition could directly drive merchant growth, things like increasing conversion rates or loyalty, then we weren't going to have a seat at the table. And that changed everything. We repositioned Lune from doing good for the planet, even though I wish personally that that was enough of a proposition. We are in the world that we're in. And so we repositioned Ravio to embed climate impact, differentiate your brand, increase conversion, and so on. I pressure tested this with a quick 5-slide pitch deck that I created in a really a half hour. And I went out and validated that message directly in outbound calls, sales pitches, messaging sprints. And that changed everything. It accelerated our learning. And we considered it like positioning our way to product market fit because we were able to see which deals were going to close faster, what the key objections were, is there actual willingness to pay or just interest of like, oh, nice technology, have a nice day. Um, so by niching down, it not only gives clarity of what you're building and for whom, but will they pay for it? And if the answer is no, which is perfectly acceptable, it means you're moving on faster. And that's the risk that we want to reduce at this particular stage. One last case study, and then I will wrap up here. So I mentioned I worked at Deliveroo. I could go on for a long time about all my different war stories from that phase, but ultimately I was hired to build a brand new product at Deliveroo, which was an ad platform, and I had to come in and launch it across 13 different markets. The problem is that no one wanted percentage discount offers. All restaurants had different ideas of what they wanted. The business wanted me to make this profitable and grow and all these different commercial expectations all at once. And yet I came into the business and we had built what we built, which was a percentage discount offer. And so I said, I have to go and build my own instincts for what restaurants actually want and what they're willing to pay for. And so I interviewed restaurants across 5 different markets and I understood the small businesses and the big enterprise chains. And I learned that in our portfolio of 100,000 restaurants, there was a small group of folks who actually wanted to grow. Some restaurants were not interested in growing. Some of them had such sophisticated marketing tooling that they were like light years ahead of this ad platform we were trying to launch. And there was a little niche in that portfolio of restaurants who wanted to grow but didn't trust what we had built. Even though we thought it was great and sophisticated and wonderful, they were like, I have no idea if creating an offer is going to actually get me new customers. Is it going to help me grow? So we paused the entire launch and added in like an ROI summary that would immediately tell restaurants how much growth they had in order volume, AOV, like are they getting more loyal customers? And immediately when we did that, we won them over and willingness to pay unlocked. We had a 70% offer repeat rate, which means 70% of restaurants came back to create additional offers within 30 to 60 days. And we were able to go from 200,000 to 3 million orders in 6 months with no marketing budget because we had truly given them something that they valued and were willing to pay for. And we grew to 1 million incremental consumer orders within a year, all with zero budget. So by finding the right message for the right ICP and testing it quickly with clear ROI signals, we were able to unlock adoption in a much like less painful way than just putting it out there and seeing what happens. Okay, I know I'm a little over time, but just to wrap up here, the TLDR is don't wait, test pricing early, don't build for everyone, just find the first 5 people who will pay right now. Interest is cheap, even though it feels good. Payment is the signal you're looking for because at the end of the day, validation is better than polish, even though level makes it very easy to add some fun polish. But don't stray. Cool. So I've just put together a few resources for you from my little newsletter, and I've built my slides on Lovable today. So if you go to gtmfundamentals.lovable.app, you'll have access to all these slides. And on this slide, I've linked to my research guide. I think I put it in the Discord on the kickoff call, but if you want to actually interview customers, uncover what they value in their problem, that's an interview guide for you. I've also put together a little kind of ultimate go-to-market guide for lovable founders. That's you. And then last, I have a little podcast I did with Seed Camp VC on how to define and validate your ICP if you want some fun lunchtime audio learning. So that is all available to you, and that is all. Thank you so much. Happy to take any questions.
Amazing. Oh, we've got questions. We've got questions here in
Okay.
Zoom. We've got questions in YouTube. So we're going for a combo here. So let me
Okay.
start off with where did it go? All right, from Anna. How do we know if the talks we did with users is enough? Where is the threshold that tells us the problem is truly validated and that people will pay to use its solution?
Great question. So, in my time as a product marketer, I tend to find, and this is maybe specific to B2B. I don't know if this is different for more consumer. I don't think it will be. I usually find 5 to 10 interviews is where I will start to see trends coming up. And usually by like the 7th to 10th interview, I am anticipating their responses because there's like threads. And I'm more than happy to help you to kind of dissect how to distill out of those interviews the value that you're trying to build for. Let me know. More than happy to help. Um, but to really answer your question, it's doing this work. Like there's only so much research you can do. It's building a hypothesis and a bet for what you're selling. And the work that we're talking about here in terms of just standing up your storefront of how you test willingness to pay, that's the evidence that you're looking for. Because you could effectively be continuing to research and research and research in perpetuity, and you're not going to get that validation of payment. So that's kind of the goal of running this type of exercise.
Wonderful. So question from YouTube. We have Simone. How do you manage the legal part in this kind of MVP, like a lovable prototype or MVP, as far as cookies, privacy policy, etc.?
That's a great question. I think what for specifically for willingness to pay, if you don't have a fully baked product yet where you've done all of the security and validation and compliance readiness, we're kind of talking about testing the surface level. So I don't know if I have like a specific answer for you, but what I'm trying to say is clearly articulate what you're selling, why you're selling it, who it's for, and test whether or not people are engaging with that in time, money, or access. So if they join the wait list. If you get 5 people joining your wait list, then you invest in figuring out the stuff under the hood. And I don't know if I have like a clear, specific answer for exactly how to approach that. I don't know if anything, for me, from a level perspective, I know this came up a bit in our season 1 of like compliance security stuff. Is there anything you guys want to add?
I'm so sorry. I was typing as
Oh no.
you were saying. As far as security and everything, you know, it also depends on where you are in the world with different policies and regulations there.
Mm.
I honestly don't know. I think if you make it clear that this is a test, a prototype,
Yeah.
and then you can probably be a little bit more in the ent like the first beginnings of it. Just be very honest about what you're hoping to achieve, and what you're going to do with any information.
Great point. And that's a great point. So one thing I would also add is on your landing page or your prototype, whatever you're putting forward to people to test willingness to pay, you can think about that real estate as an opportunity to get ahead of the objections you might anticipate. So if you know your potential buyer is very concerned and that there's a potential for that to negatively affect your sign up rate, having a section like Whitney says on what you intend to build, is it SOC 2 compliance or GDPR or whatever that is, so that they know that that is something that is very top of mind for you and maybe even a part of your differentiation. That could be a way of getting ahead of that without having to actually build it all out first.
Great. And let's see, a question from Tim. How do I know the right price consumers are willing to pay for for the product?
Great question. So I have done a lot of consumer research on other platforms. Maybe I should have mentioned that. There are lots of different platforms to do scaled research. So you can use one that I've used is called pollfish.com, and you can run kind of more high volume price elasticity testing stuff. Reach out to me afterwards. I'm more than happy to help. I also, for more of a B2B context, have used a platform called userevidence.com. And both of these platforms allow you to build like persona profiles of who you're trying to reach so that you can say, I want to only distribute my pricing survey to women who have done the She Builds hackathon with Lovable. Might be too small of an audience size, but they will tell you whether or not your audience is big enough to have statistical significance in the results that you receive. So I found that really nice to take more of an evidence-based approach. There's one thing I forgot to mention is just how long is a piece of string when it comes to pricing research? There's so much complexity and Van Westendorp analysis and crazy stuff, but we're really focusing on the lightest lift possible for the stage that you guys are at post hackathon. But if you do want any more information about how more robust you can get, please just reach out. I'm happy to help.
And if you can share, a question from Daphne, in Deliveroo, what was the exact pivot in your messaging that attracted your customers and got their buy-in?
Oh my gosh. I just did my whole little keynote at Product Marketing Alliance on this specific particular thing because I wonder if there's a way that I can answer this quickly. Uh, it was talking to restaurants, understanding it was going against our internal assumption that all restaurants wanted to grow. That was wrong. That was something that was internally understood. And when I talked to restaurants, I realized there was huge variance and nuance in their needs and motivations to be on the platform. So as soon as I started talking to restaurants, realizing there was a mindset of restaurant that I wanted to appeal to, a restaurant who did want to grow on the platform but didn't know how, and understanding their reality of just how razor thin their margins are. That some restaurants were making choices every day about whether they stock ketchup or mustard because they couldn't afford the two. Of course, they weren't going to want to try a discount tool to run a 15% discount code. They simply can't afford it. So, what changed for me is niching down to the particular audience that had motivation to grow and meeting their needs. So we paused the product launch. I joined my big fancy job at Deliveroo 2 weeks in. I paused the entire launch. I was really popular. And actually, shout out to my product manager for actually making the decision to do that. I don't take that for granted. And we added in this email that would go to restaurants that would tell them exactly how well the offer performed. And by making that almost promise to restaurants to give us a chance, and we'll say exactly how many new customers you got if they stay loyal, we were able to overcome some of those objections and get people to try it. And that's where the flywheel or the growth loop really began. And that's when we got the 70% offer repeat rate. So it was again going against our assumptions, building what they actually needed, meeting them in their worldview and their mindset, and creating something that actually delivered value that unlocked adoption. And I could do a whole separate talk on the pricing strategy that I built for restaurants. That's one of the things I'm really proud of in my career.
All
Yeah.
right, and we will end with one more. Let me find it. Can you clarify pay by access? Do you mean users sharing their data by access or something else?
Access to them. You can call it a like a design partner, but in general, I think one kind of more qualitative measure of success is when you're doing the socializing of your idea and testing willingness to pay. If you have customers who sign up to almost co-build it with you and provide ongoing feedback and access to them and their world, that is a huge signal that they're investing their energy, I suppose, and access to them. Yeah, you got it. That's what I meant.
Wonderful. All right. Well, this is a lot of really great information, and I think we do have to get you to come back. As you and I were talking
Absolutely.
beforehand, there's just so much wonderful knowledge you have. Everyone is saying thank you, and as you can
Pleasure.
see by all the reactions, these resources are incredible. So thank you for taking the time to put them in a way that everyone can access. Um, I would love to see the number of visitors to your site soon. Like that,
Yeah, yeah.
that's gonna but this is great. Thank you so much, Alicia,
My
and
pleasure.
can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always a blast with the Lovable crew, and congrats on your fundraise and
Thank
congrats on
you.
the She Builds season 2 group. I'm so excited to see how and where you all grow, and do reach out either on LinkedIn or on Discord if you have any follow-up questions.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everybody.